building the assumptions sheet. I talked earlier about putting some elements of the financial forecast as inputs that you can change to look at different scenarios. We generally put them in an assumption sheet. Let's start with a fundamental question. Why do you need a separate assumption sheet? Well, there's two reasons. The first is for you to easily remember what assumptions you made while building your sheet. People will ask you about them. And second, and more importantly, is that you're able to play around with your numbers. We call that sensitivities. I'll come back to what I mean by sensitivities in a moment. Right now, let's focus on building the forecast to ensure that all dependent numbers like price, percentage penetration, and other assumed variables are in your inputs or assumptions sheet and are formula linked. If you're not familiar enough with Excel, this is quite important to learn about or bring in expertise to do this, or there'll be a lot of manual corrections every time you look at changing any of your assumptions as you go forward. You'll create formula linkage to the assumption sheet here and have the key numbers that drive that forecast. Here's a couple of examples. Let's look at your assumption for percentage of people who look at, click through, or buy a product. Let's say again you assume 2% of your website visitors will buy your product. This is an assumption that you'll record in this sheet. If you want to change this percentage to 5%, you want to see how it impacts your revenue and the entire revenue sheet, it'll automatically change, driven by the one change in the assumption sheet. Another example is salary increases. If you have a 5% built-in annual increase to salaries and you're finding that the costs are just getting too heavy in year 3 or 4, you have a chance to just change one input and it'll walk all the way through the model, not only to change the salaries, but to change the final outcomes. If you change it up 7.5 or down to 2%, you'll see exactly what that means in terms of the deep effect it has throughout your business. You'll quickly see how a small change in one number will have a significant change to your bottom line, to your timing, and your cash requirements. This is often called sensitivity analysis or sensitivities. Another example of sensitivity is your cost of sale. Let's assume that you think that it costs 25 cents to get a potential customer to visit your site. Since you've built the model on that assumption, how does it change if the cost per visit becomes 15 cents in reality, or maybe 2 cents? Does the entire model go underwater with a 10-cent increase in cost? This kind of analysis will help you understand the critically important elements that ensure you keep the cost under 10 cents. In this example, there are two important sensitivity elements: the number of site visits, the click-through, to the buying page, and then how many people who click through that page and actually go all the way to purchase the product. That gets you to the cost of customer acquisition, or what we call CAC, C-A-C. In most cases, cost of customer acquisition has high sensitivity. It's an important thing to look at. To drill this point home, here are a couple more variables that you want to look at and be able to easily adjust. One of those is churn. A lot of entrepreneurs don't think about churn before they start their business, but in most instances, there's a set of customers who give back their product or don't buy it. This substantially affects your cost of sales. Let's say that after 1 year, you find you have a 2% of your customers who churn each month. That's not an unusual number. This means, though, that your customer acquisition costs are 24% higher than you thought to meet the numbers that you're projecting. That could be a big miss. Another example is accounts receivable. A portfolio of mine sells systems to colleges. It's a good business, but local colleges don't pay for at least 90 days after they get an invoice, no matter what the invoice says, no matter how hard they beg. They just don't. All of a sudden, despite meeting target sales, the company was running out of money. That was because 1/4 of the cash they expected from customers, while booked and committed, wasn't coming into their bank account. If they had a variable input on their financial forecast for the number of days of AR, accounts receivable, they could have planned for this. An easy trick to use while working on this sheet is to highlight key cells that can be changed for iteration in the financial forecast. I highlight them in blue so I know which ones I can change. Remember, this is still an iterative process, as the numbers that you'll get will come in from that model will depend on what goal you set, how you think about things, and then realistically how you experience things in the marketplace. Part of that may come just through your market validation tests. So keep those in mind. So how are you doing? Are you dizzy yet? As you can see, there's a lot here. The purpose of this video series is to familiarize you with what will be expected, give you a flavor of what you'll need, and the key elements you'll need to figure out. If you are what we call an Excel jockey, you've got this. If you're like most of us though, this is where your team gets together, reads a bunch on this subject, including the articles and examples connected with this module, and asks your support team members, your incubator, accelerator, your mentors, to help you through building a great income statement forecast. Because we're still not done yet. You still have to produce pro forma financial statements.